Donald Trump is still delusional about Ukraine. So this man gets on the Turning Point USA stage and sits there and says Volodymyr Zelensky is the best political salesman ever because every time he comes to our country, he leaves with $60 billion. But if you elect Trump, before he's even inaugurated, he'll end the war in a heartbeat. You can't make this up. It's like a snake oil salesman in the 1800s on a fucking wooden platform selling you piss. This he's deluding his audience. It's actually disrespectful. I have nothing against Trump supporters, but the way he and the rest of his henchmen treat y'all is atrocious.
Zelensky is maybe the greatest salesman of any politician that's ever lived. Every time he comes to our country, he walks away with $60 billion. I will have that settled prior to taking the White House as president-elect.
No, you won't. No, he won't. Sorry. Like, if you support Trump, I'm sorry. No, he won't. He won't solve that problem as soon as he takes office. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. Donald Trump is going to tell Ukraine, look, I'm going to cut any and all funding from you unless you surrender the Donbass region to Russia. Ukraine's obviously going to say, no, they invaded us twice now, and they're trying to take these lands from us by backing and arming separatist groups since 2014. We're not giving them land because they violently take it from us. No. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to just be funded by Europe. The EU will fund Ukraine instead. Then the United States loses its geopolitical leverage in Ukraine, probably even in Europe, and then we're left completely out of the conflict with no ability to actively and directly dictate the outcome of it. Donald Trump is selling all of you a fantasy. And if you believe America is so powerful and Donald Trump is such a negotiator that he can make Ukraine surrender, you're delusional. Remember Afghanistan? People go, oh, Joe Biden botched that. Yeah, that was botched. You won't hear a tinge of denial about that from me. Here's what I will say. Donald Trump's the one who ordered that pullout from Afghanistan. He's the one who wanted us to leave Afghanistan. Why am I bringing up Afghanistan? We were in Afghanistan for 20 years. And after 20 years, these Afghans still didn't fight against the Taliban when the Taliban rolled in. I want you to understand, we didn't want the Afghans to roll over to the Taliban. It was in our best 20-year-long trillion-dollar interest that they didn't do that. But instead, they did. The reality is we can't make people do anything. We're a powerful nation, but we can't make anyone do anything when we're not there. Even when we were there, we couldn't really make the Afghans do anything. To be honest, it's the truth. Ukraine is not going to surrender to Russia. Russia invaded them in 2014 and took Crimea. Russia backed, armed, trained, and supported separatist groups in the Donbass region, and then Russia invaded again in an attempt to annex the nation state of Ukraine. Ukraine's not going to surrender. If fucking Canada or Mexico invaded us, we would not surrender, especially after a prior invasion. Ukraine is not surrendering. I'm sorry, but Donald Trump's not coming up with some super mega deal. He's not. He can't. And I'm going to say this to you as well. If you think Donald Trump has the answer to the war in Ukraine, Donald Trump has to be one of the most malevolent people to ever grace the office of the president. If you have the answer to the problem of the war in Ukraine, why would you just not give it to the White House? Donald Trump's the same guy who sat there and said, I want people to stop dying. I don't want anybody to win. I want people to stop dying. Well, if you want people to stop dying, why are you withholding your ultra super secret, foolproof solution to the war? The reality is he doesn't have one. I want to cover some facts for those who are in denial about Donald Trump's delusion as it pertains to Ukraine. Number one, Donald Trump sits there and talks about 60 billion. 60 billion is not that much money as it pertains to the GDP of the United States. I need you guys to understand, $60 billion is about 0.33% of our GDP. We've committed about 0.33 to about 0.32% of our GDP. We haven't even committed 1% of our GDP to this war. We're not taking all this money that could be used for American people and throwing it at Ukraine. I'm sorry. I know I know conservative political pundits and politicians are convincing you that that 60 billion is so much and the Ukrainians are taking so much necessary money for the American people. The reality is 60 billion is 0.33, 0.32% of our GDP. It's not that much. It's not. Volodymyr Zelensky is not leaving with a significant amount of money. Now to you, to me, to average individuals, 60 billion is life-changing. For the US government, 60 billion is chunk change. It's true. It's just the facts. It just is. Like, I don't know what people want me to, like, I don't know what people want to hear. Like, it's possible that Trump and his people are lying to you. It's possible that Trump and his people are over-exaggerating or even just bullshitting you. And I think it's important for MAGA supporters to realize no one in politics is 100% trustworthy. I'm sorry. It's just not true. Trump met with Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. This Viktor Orban met with Donald Trump when Donald Trump was not even president. This was a few months ago. Orban met with Trump and then left the meeting saying that a single dollar is going to Ukraine from the Trump administration. Now, why in the is Donald Trump discussing American fiscal and foreign policy with a foreign politician when Trump is not in office? Why? Viktor Orban basically snitched. He basically came out and said, yeah, me and Trump discussed how we're basically going to cut off funding to Ukraine so the war can end and there can be peace. Because apparently, when Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine and takes Crimea, when Vladimir Putin backs and arms separatist groups in the Donbass region, when Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine a second time in an attempt to annex the nation state, when he does all of this, instead of draining his military and economy by aiding the Ukrainians in this war, instead the solution is to simply give him what he wants. Give Vladimir Putin more land. Because if we give him more land, he'll stop. Oh, and if we don't allow Ukraine to join NATO, they'll really stop. The reality is this. Vladimir Putin's reasons for the war in Ukraine are bunk now. The reality is Finland has joined NATO. So the whole argument of we don't want a NATO nation state on our border, that's bad for Russian national security. Your invasion of Ukraine caused Finland to join NATO. That's not an argument anymore. Figure out a new excuse for why you invaded Ukraine. We want to denazify Ukraine. The heads of Wagner Group before Vladimir Putin killed them were neo-Nazis. We want to demilitarize Ukraine. That's not Russia's choice. It is not in Russia's power to determine whether another nation state demilitarizes. The entire goal of Russia is to annex the nation state of Ukraine. Not allowing Ukraine to join NATO allows Russia to re-invade at a later point in time without having to worry about direct NATO interference, because Russia honestly cannot beat us in a war. All of what Trump is doing is meant to help Vladimir Putin and Russia win the war in Ukraine. When you hear someone sit there and say that we promised Russia to never expand NATO, that's a lie. The United States cannot make all-encompassing decisions for NATO without a referendum of other nation states. We just can't do that. When anyone tells you that we promised we would not expand NATO, that is a lie. When someone tells you that, Vladimir Putin had to denazify Ukraine, Vladimir Putin hired the two neo-Nazis that ran Wagner Group before he killed them. When anyone tells you that, Vladimir Putin is worried about NATO aggression, this is the same guy whose retarded invasion of Ukraine brought about Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Congrats, dummies. There is absolutely zero reason as to why the United States of America should debase and defile itself by aiding Russia in its disgusting imperialistic disruption of the world order. Zero reason to engage in that. Zero reason to assist Vladimir Putin in that. And for Donald Trump to try to minimize what's going on in Ukraine as Zelensky being a salesman. Oh, Zelensky's a salesman. Zelensky is a world leader who's fighting for the existence of his nation state. We literally told Zelensky, we'll evacuate you from Ukraine. You don't have to stay there. Come with us. We'll get you out of there. We'll help you figure everything out. That man said, no, I'm staying. I'm staying with my people. That's not a salesman. That's a G. That's a real nigga. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, that's a real G. We offered this man evacuation, even when Putin was sending hit squads to kill him. He said, "No, I'm good. I'm staying right here with my people." That's a real leader. Trump sits there and says he's the greatest salesman ever, as if what's going on in Ukraine is a meh situation. It's a eh. He's a salesman, really? Ukraine is what's standing in between Russian aggression that disrupts the world order and throws off the balance of power in Europe and possibly causes World War III. Ukraine is standing in between a possible World War III scenario and possible peace. Russia is the source of this threat. Ukraine is the guard in between that. If we can fund and arm them to win this war, or at least to make Russia incapable of fighting beyond the Donbass region and force them back into that region and possibly cede that territory, then it is what it is. That's what we're looking for. That's our best case scenario. But the idea that Vladimir Putin and Russia should be emboldened and supported is just ridiculous. And Trump supporters, I promise you, this is not what you want. I know Candace Owens told you this is what you want, and Tucker told you this is what you want, and Dave Smith told you this is what you want. You don't want Russia to win this war. You don't. I promise you, you don't. Russia is not your friend. Putin is not your friend. I'm telling you this right now. Right now, we have the opportunity to stop a World War III scenario without risking a single American soldier. It's incredibly important that we take that opportunity seriously. So when you see Donald Trump make ridiculous statements like, "Oh, I can stop the war within a few days when I get elected to president." No, you can't. You cannot make Ukraine surrender. It's just not possible. You can't. And it'll look unbelievably horrible on Donald Trump's record if Ukraine refuses to surrender and is annexed by Russia because Europe isn't able to fill in the gap. If that happens, the Donald Trump presidency will be stained with the image of weakness. I don't know. The unfortunate reality is that the Republican media base has convinced so many of its supporters that supporting Ukraine is a bad idea, that although supporting Ukraine is a good idea, Donald Trump can't even say, "Hey, look, we're going to support Ukraine." He can't even make the right choice because his base will turn on him. His base will turn on him. He can't even... Bruh, he's just delusional. Delusional. "I'll end the war as soon as I'm the president-elect." No, you can't. You can't. It's impossible. You can't make Ukraine surrender. You can force Ukraine to be conquered, which will only embolden Russia to take over even more countries like Moldova and Romania. and then it'll be too late. It will definitely at that point be too late. A Trump presidency is going to be a fucking disaster for this country. I'm telling you, if this man wins again, this will be one of the darkest times in our history. I'm telling you right now, bro. Uncle Trump. Look, I don't hate Trump. I don't dislike Trump supporters. I'm not some guy that despises MAGA, but anybody with a lick of understanding of this conflict can see the incompetence coming from a mile away. Hopefully Donald Trump does not win the presidency in 2020, this year, 2024. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm out.